It's finance time. Thank you, CAE Davis and your team, and thank you, Chair Norton. We're turn time to you for finance.
Oh, there we go.
So I'm going to be presenting the actions from our June something board meeting. Just 1 second, let me move down. I'm going strictly off my computer today. I'm getting rid of a little paper, so I'm not as fast. Okay, so in item number 3, the committee, just 1 second. That the board directs staff to develop a legislative request for the 2024 legislative session to evaluate the fiscal impact to maintain a student count of 16 or less in all Utah K-12 classrooms.
This is
I do. Because, okay, technology gone, back to paper.
Member Bogus.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hart. So this was discussed during the finance meeting. It was also discussed. I had the pleasure to meet with Superintendent Jones, and I just want to be clear that I got some phone calls about it, and we are not talking about student-teacher ratio. That is not our goal in this. The goal is to lower the number that is present in a group of students that travels around the building. We understand that there are people on contracts that are not necessarily with students all the time, whether they be educational coaches or specialists or whatever else, and people are on teacher contracts. Our goal with this initiative is not to lower the student-teacher ratio. It's legitimately to decrease class size as students mobilize in groups throughout their educational experience. So I just wanted to make that clear for the record.
Thank you. Oh, are you running this?
No, I'm sorry. No, you
run
go.
it. Run
No, I will just press the button.
Which either way.
You have to call him.
All right, Member Hymas.
Yeah, you're right.
We got the Keystone Cops, and I'm the you got. I know. I'll talk. You do the actual work. Member Hymas.
I like that better.
Thank you. So the request is to maintain a student count of 16 or less in all Utah K-12 classrooms, which the request is to, I just want to make sure I understand, to find out how much money that will cost. And we can't just say a whole lot more than we have. You know what I mean? Like some classes, we don't even want fewer than 16. If you're talking about a band class or a choir class or a PE class. Schools, I don't believe, could hold classes of 16. I just did a Google search, Stansbury High School, the high school next to me. This is the year is off, but 4,938 students. If I divide that by 16, that's a number of teachers at any given time. And then you think, well, I've got to have that many classrooms as well. I don't know if this is worth the time of the legislature to put into. I could be wrong here, but it just seems like it's an unachievable goal.
Is this a question for Member Bogus or a comment?
I guess I'm speaking against this inquiry.
Gotcha. Other questions? I almost called you Representative. Superintendent Dixon. Oh, we got to light up Superintendent Dixon today. Is that right?
Well, we can only have two, which means I'll take someone off. So take.
Thank you, Chair Moss. And this might be directed at Deputy Jones, but at one time, well, let me just back up and say this question arises every legislative session. How could we spend money on reducing class size? And for teachers, it feels very real in some of their classes. At one time, Deputy Jones, there was a figure we used of what it would cost to reduce class size by one student, and I believe it was across the state, if I'm remembering correctly. So I'm calling on you to correct any misinformation I might have. But if we could just bring that information forward to the board, that might be helpful, just as some kind of metric, to your point, Board Member Hymas, to try to figure out what that looks like, given that some of our CTE courses are lower class sizes. When you average, you're averaging all of the classes, to your point. So you've got band, CTE, some of our special education classes. So context matters and content matters in terms of the class size. And I know when this has been done before, just having that figure of what it would cost reduced by one was very helpful in a bigger context. I don't know if LFAs still have that data, if it would be current, but that's something that as staff, we could look into and bring back to the board if that would be helpful. And I just defer to Deputy Jones if there's anything I'm misremembering or needs to be added to that.
Deputy Jones has given a thumbs up. So other lights, I had a question. Oh, and then Vice Chair Earl, I guess that kind of goes to my same question. Is this something that we need to ask the legislature to fund, or is this a board question that we might explore internally first? And I think maybe that's where Superintendent Dixon is going. Seems like an interesting question and one that we're probably equipped to handle. I did see in the backup a study from 2014-15. That's the one you're talking about. So I guess that's my question. Very interesting subject, maybe one that the legislature doesn't necessarily want to fund us to explore, and that rather we could handle. But Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, we fund, and I talk about the state of Utah, we fund class size reduction. In my mind, I like the direction you're heading, meaning we want a sustainable class size, right? But in my mind, the question is, where is the funding we're putting into that already going? Because when you asked this at the last meeting, when I listened to it, that's what I began to think was, aren't we already funding lower class size? And then when I looked into it, I'm thinking we need to know whether that's effectively actually reducing class sizes, or whether how that's being used. That's where my mind went before we say, here's some more money. But if it's already not effectively reducing that class size, then what does the more money do? Does that make sense? So I think there's some questions to be asked here. And I think they're return on investment kind of questions, right? Are we actually getting the lower class size for what we're already doing? Or is that money actually being, not saying siphoned off or whatever, used in a way that maybe doesn't get to the crux of the reason why it was there? So that's, to me, that's what I think that's where I'd want to go first before I said, okay, here's more money for class reduction. I would want to know, is this actually effective in putting money into that? And maybe you're asking a slightly different question, but that's how I understood your question, is we want to get down to this class size for our schools. So anyways, in my mind, that's the direction I think we should head prior to asking for a continued reduction.
Okay, further comment or question? Member Straight.
And of course, there's many different ways to go about achieving greater effectiveness in the classroom. Am I on? I'm not on. It's red down there. Oh, red hot. Okay, that's right. I remember that. All right. So, and one of the things that we've found is that highly qualified aides are very effective in increasing productivity within the classroom for a less cost. In other words, we have more students in there, but we also have much more instructional power. Thank you.
Back to Member Bogus.
Awesome, thank you. So just in response to Member Hymas, I think, unless I recall incorrectly, Superintendent Jones and I discussed some of the things that you brought forward, that, you know, we're talking about everything from real estate to other things. And we know, like, your band teachers really want 65 kids in there. That's a desire they have. And so that plays into it. We discussed that it's messy and that it's ugly and that it's not a simple solution, and that we would have to trade off something to make it happen. And then the conversation as we came out of that, and then I believe Superintendent Jones left, and I met with staff for a while, is that a lot of the problems that our institutions in our state are facing, whether everything from behavior to teacher burnout to all of these things, so many of them can be addressed with just having fewer kids in the classroom. And so to explore it, maybe not to see it through to fruition, but to explore it so that we know what we're facing and what we would have to trade for it, would be something that could prove fruitful.
All right, thank you. Oh, last member, Hymas.
Just a question for Christina, Member Bogus. Would this then, to Chair Moss's point, would this then still go to the legislature, or would that be something that we ask staff to look into?
Apologize. So I think
you.
that would be something that should the board approve to ask staff to look into this and to develop this evaluation and tell us what it's going to cost, then it would be probably to correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent Jones, it would be put before the body to determine whether or not we wanted to champion a legislative cause to make it happen. But it would clearly, the numbers that I have looked at in my research and some information that is in backup that I reviewed earlier this month would indicate that we would have to prioritize this and let go of programs that may not have a high ROI. It would be something where we would have to look hard. Do we want 40 kids in our ELA class? Or do we want to let go of this program and reduce that to 35? Like, what would it cost and what would we have to trade to make it happen? Because it's not chump change. It is hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's not completely confirmed yet, but it's pretty clear that this is not something that comes without sacrifice. So thank you.
I could be if you want. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. So I completely concur with what Board Member Bogus just articulated to you. That would be the process. I mean, what you're basically voting on is, a request for funding. Back to Chair Moss's question, though, we would absolutely need help from the legislature. I mean, as she articulated as well, we would be looking closely at, facility needs, things like this. So there might be an opportunity to use the stabilization money in a one-time fashion to have LEAs try this. It could be something like a pilot project, or, but I would anticipate that the board would not have sufficient funds to do it. Or if you wanted to go that direction, it would be limited, right? On a limited scale, so to speak, that where the board could, try to apply some level of funding, but how deep that would go, how many districts and charter schools would be involved is another question. In just the background, if you hadn't had a chance to read the study that was done in 2015, I mean, the class size reduction right now is the funding that goes towards is really about maintenance. This was I think it was born somewhere around the 1990s. And since then, it's become more of a maintenance effort than it has to, continually or perpetually reduce class sizes. One other thing to consider too is, we're looking at a period of either flat or lower growth that will change as birth rates come back or things like that. So, all these things would have to take, we'd have to consider. But Board Member Bogus is correct in everything she said. And then hopefully I answered Chair Moss's question about, it really just matters the extent that you, the board, want to go to. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Lear, I believe, and then Member Davis.
On these questions, I tend to defer to the committees because you had more time to discuss them. You had a deeper discussion than ostensibly we are. So that was my initial thought. But as we've heard more, and I'm having kind of conflicting feelings because there is nothing I would like more than smaller class sizes where schools and teachers want those. On the other hand, I have heard for decades the astronomical cost of doing that. So studying it once again seems to me an exercise in futility. But if the committee heard all this discussion and unanimously supported it, I'm wondering what I'm missing. So Kristen, just to save our time, not hear from every committee member, but Kristen, what was it that was persuasive to the full committee to study this?
We did not.
Sorry. Chair Norton, yes.
We did not go into that depth of discussion. We were putting together and discussing legislative requests, and this was one, like you originally said, yes, this is one that we would all love. And so that's what we agreed upon, is that, yep, we would all love it. Where the money comes from, how it is appropriated, if it can be appropriated, all of those questions were not discussed. It was, let's bring it to the board and see if they want to study it, look at it, direct staff to work on it. It was one of those that we are bringing to discuss with the board.
Thank you.
Sure.
Push the button. You have to
Yep.
push button
Hit the button.
and then take you off. You have to-
That's really helpful. That makes me understand that it was more a vote about, let's see what the board thinks than, yes, we think this is a great idea. That's helpful. Thank you.
Member Davis.
Just a quick point of clarification. Deputy Superintendent Jones just said something that I did not recall understanding or hearing in committee meeting, and that was that this is a fiscal request. This request in and of itself is a fiscal request, or it could potentially at some point lead to a fiscal request, because my understanding is we were just asking to do some data compiling. I also want to make note too, when we talk about programs, it does get a little bit difficult to say some programs you could, but the legislature often asks us to find programs that could be helpful for LEAs across the board, because they're trying to find uses for one-time only funding. And so it wouldn't necessarily be a conversation about, getting rid of all the programs to be able to lower class sizes. I just want to make sure that that's kind of understood as well. But what I heard in the committee meeting is that we had a lot of the data already that we could use to come up with some better understanding and how much it would cost to have some class reductions.
Thank you, Member Davis. I don't think we have more lights. Deputy Jones, and I guess piggybacking on that, I guess the fiscal ask at this point of developing the possibilities, because I agree, I like asking the questions. And so my question here is, what are we proposing in terms of a fiscal spend either here or at the legislature to do that exploration, which would then lead to the possibility of recommending action, right? But what's that interim financial request that we're talking about here? Because I do like the idea that Member Bogg is proposing to.
Okay, so just to clarify, Board Member Davis is right. So what we were seeking here, and there's 3 motions, and if you look at the agenda item, that was another opportunity for the Finance Committee to move forward. If the board wants to just direct staff to do a data analysis, that's fine. But the request for funding process really is a value add, because it makes us do that analysis, right? And then come back to you in a subsequent meeting. But as you recall, staff is really interested in ensuring that we support the board's direction, your direction on, hey, we do want to look at a potential request for funding. So then you would move that today, right, to do that. Or if you want to limit it to not a request for funding and have us do analysis, I'm not sure if that fits in the actual motion that was made to it, but staff are here to serve you in whatever aspect you want. My recommendation is that you do ask us to put together a request for funding, because that's the forcing function, so to speak, on us doing the analysis, right? On how much, it would cost to reach the pieces and points that Board Member Bogus brought up in the Finance Committee and then again today. So that's what my understanding of the process. Chief Staff Young here is here as well. I think that's hers as well. And what we were seeking coming out of the Finance Committee was a decision from the board on whether to, pursue potential request for funding, which we would try to put together and have ready for you for your September meeting. So does that make sense, Sharon? Over.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the funding we would be seeking at this point is to fund the exploration and data analysis.
Can be.
We're not going to know exactly by September, October, some action to take towards reducing class size. Just for my own clarity here, because again, I do support the concept. I guess it's been a couple months, and so we're a little bit rusty from what we discussed in committee. At least I am. But that would be what you'd work up for September is a proposal from the legislature to fund us to analyze these various questions about class size, some ROI questions, some teachers versus full adults in the building, all these different questions that Member Bogus has raised. And you would be working up then the size of that request, what it would take to fund the exploration. And I guess we're saying that doing the exploration now, just on our own without legislative funding, would not be possible. We need that. That's to me the tight question here. We need legislative funding to support the analysis we want to do in order to then potentially get to something where we propose action based on that analysis. 2 steps. Am I getting that right though? We need legislative funding to do the analysis?
Well, Chair, to answer your question, we would certainly look at both. What funding is available here at this level? We'd work closely with the LFA. They've made a suggestion that, we could look at stabilization money one time to help us as well. But you're spot on. We would, I just want to make sure that I wouldn't just automatically just say, well, don't look at any money from the board, right? That would all be part of the analysis roll up, depending on what we're never presumptive. Staff are never presumptive. It's up to you to direct us what you want in the scope of it. But yeah, that's very feasible. I wouldn't just skip over the top. I shouldn't have made it sound like, I think it'd be very difficult though to not only, I think it'd be very difficult to come to a conclusion if we're limited in the scope of how many LEAs are trying it, right? Or whatever that leads to. I really do. And I'm not sure the board has enough funding to really make a big difference in something like a pilot or to try different movements of students, as Board Member Bogus was talking about. So
thank you. Member Vice Chair.
Yeah, I just have a question. I just want to make sure I understand, because I'm making sure the motion has to do with evaluating the fiscal impact. So it's a study motion. It's not, we're asking for money to do this. We're asking for money to evaluate. Am I understanding that correctly? Because I want to know what I'm voting for. I'm interested in a study, so we understand. Is that what that's what we discussed. Okay, just that clarification so that I know what okay.
Member Davis.
I'm sorry. I just want to clarify again. We're just sitting here talking about, are we asking for money? And if so, how much? The legislature investigates and does deep dives into things all the time through OLAG and other means, and we don't require a fiscal note for that. So my intention was not to spend more money to find out about money. It's just to ask them to use the resources that they have to help us with the information. Is that
Deputy Jones
accurate?
Gotta get him.
So, Chair, to answer Board Member Davis's question, the answer is yes. in order to evaluate the fiscal impacts of this, if we do the analysis and do a request for funding, it doesn't necessarily mean staff are going to come back and say we need this amount of money. What it does is that it is a board directed, hey, look at the potential for funding by doing the analysis. Does that make sense? Because I'm not saying, I don't know how much would make the difference, but if you don't direct us to do the analysis, then we won't know to come up or back to you to request particular funding, whether it comes from the board and or the legislature. I think I understand what Board Member Davis is saying, but we just don't know. My understanding was that the Finance Committee wanted to go along what Vice Chair Earl was saying, which was, hey, direct staff to do the analysis to come up with what the fiscal impacts, but how much would it cost to do this? And your process is to direct us to put together a request for funding, but maybe we don't need any funding. I don't know. We just want to make sure that you, the board, approve us to the point of the motion, looking at what the fiscal impacts would be, or analyzing what the fiscal impacts would be of what Board Member Vargas proposed. Does that help or
I
clarify?
think so, Vice Chair Earl.
No, not really. Actually, that muddied it for me, meaning that if we're just looking at what the fiscal impact would be of getting to 16 or less, that's not answering the question that I would be interested in. The question I would be interested in, what models do we need in order to have success in a classroom at what student level? And that's, I guess I'm looking at that a little different, because we already have funding used for this. Are those models successful or not? And if not, what is it? I guess I'm looking at it as a broader thing, not just how much would it cost to do this. And that's what I'm hearing. And maybe that's not what you're saying, but that's what I heard. To me, those are two different things. Just looking for the money for something to reach this level doesn't answer the question whether or not the money would be what we've got effective reduction models and what those effective reduction models would look like. Does that make any sense, or only in my mind?
Deputy Jones, and then we've got Member Bogus and Member Norton in queue.
So to answer Vice Chair Earl's question, or to try to help clarify a little bit more, this is why I brought up that, this started back in the 1990s. There is no model right now for class size reduction. What it basically is class size sustainment, or, and then you've got, so yes, I mean, we don't necessarily need any funding. We can engage with the LFA and the LEAs, with the business administrators, and say, well, what models would we need to look at to get to what Board Member Bogus proposed? We can just do that. If that's what you want, then as the board, then we can just do that. However, if we end up, I think it's a decision point for you that if we end up finding those models, then, do you want to wait until not the next session, but the session after? Do you want to give us that time to do that? I mean, this could be pretty extensive. I anticipate we're going to get a lot of different opinions on what a model looks like for class size reduction. And then given all the parameters and considerations of facility space, all these different things can be done without, there we could use board money to help pay for that, if that's the extent of what you want. However, I would be concerned that if you would want funding or request funding from the legislature, the timing of it might not work out to where we could be ready for that in the legislative session. Is that an acceptable risk for you? Or, this is why we thought that, a request for funding would actually let us do that analysis and then try to do it. But it is a tight timeline. I understand. If the extent of this, though, is just to do exactly like Vice Chair Earl articulated, and that's the motion you make, staff will follow your direction. We will. I guarantee that.
So
thank you.
member Bogus, is that the nature of your, I just want to bring us back to procedure here. What's before us? What are the options? What's the sequence? And I know Chair Norton's in line too, that there is an analysis that apparently that are we asking for funding to do the analysis? Is that funding for us to do the analysis, for OLAG to do the analysis? At some point, the idea, I think, as I understood it and is clarified here, is that perhaps we try a model of some sort. There might be a pilot program that takes funding at some point. That would be a legislative ask that comes after the analysis, right? So I guess focusing on point one, what's the analysis, who does it, and what's the cost? That's our first question, right? And are we exploring models? Are we looking at, since you're the maker of the motion, and those of us that were in finance recall it, is that the nature of the current motion, or would that be a revision to the motion coming out of finance?
So correct me if I'm wrong, sir, please. My understanding, based on our finance meeting and my conversation with Superintendent Jones, is that perhaps the motion as it's written right there is in reverse order. What and I had the conversation with our staff and we developed this motion, but in my mind, it's in reverse order that the committee moves that the board directs staff to evaluate the fiscal impact to maintain a student count of 16 or less in all Utah classrooms and to propose to the board a possible legislative request. And if those have to happen in cohort, I think that the board should move that way. However, I've had a lot of conversations this summer. I've met with multiple staff members, and even just, I think it was last Tuesday, I met with a teacher from the Jordan School District, and I do believe that the problems our state faces inside the classroom, outside the classroom, everything from public discourse to student behavior to intervention cycles to teacher workload, all can be mitigated and addressed without extra programming through a reduction in class size. And I could articulate that in many different ways, but I think that the first step we have to do in addressing our problems in this state is to work hard and diligently toward getting fewer kids in mobile groups inside the buildings. And that would be my thing. So if we want to reframe the motion, that's fine with me, but I don't want to put it off 2 or 3 years. I would like to see this board lead out on this issue and ensure that our teachers know that we're going to ask our staff to evaluate it, and then we're going to see how we champion it forward. Should we champion it at all? Because it's not chump change. We're not talking about a $100,000 request. We're talking about over 100 million probably when this all comes to fruition, that it's complex, it's messy, it's webbed, and that the board understands that, but we're willing to navigate it anyway.
So I'll just ask, and then member Straight's in line. I'm still, maybe I'm not the only one, maybe I am. I'm still trying to get my head around the immediate ask in terms of funding to do the analysis. If we decide that there's some model that might help us to do a better job with our schools, it could be 50 million, 200 million, $1 billion, right? That's what comes after the analysis. What's the request for funding for the analysis? Are we asking the legislature this session to either do the analysis or pay us to do the analysis? I'm still lost on the basic preliminary question. Or is this just something we authorize staff to do, understanding that that analysis may produce a legislative request to do something out there in changing class size? Does that make sense? And I apologize if I'm dense. What are we asking funding for right now in terms of analyzing the situation? And are we just asking staff to work up a proposal for September for funding to do the analysis? And then step 2 is what we do with the analysis? Member Bogus, yeah. And I'm sorry, that was a question. I jumped the queue. Maybe I can just go to the other folks that are asking questions, but I'm still trying to just make sure I understand. What are we asking for funding for right now in the way of the analysis?
So
knowing that produces potential larger funding requests.
As I recall our conversation, we are not asking for funding to complete the analysis. The funding is to complete the action. So that's, but again,
that would come after the analysis.
That may come after the analysis, but if, and Member Davis and Member Norton, correct me if I'm incorrect in my recollection, but I don't believe the committee ever intended to ask this board for money to complete the analysis. We're asking for the board to direct staff to complete the analysis so that we can better evaluate where we head in the future.
Got it. And we don't need the legislature to do the analysis or fund the analysis.
I don't believe
That-
so.
that's
I
okay.
believe that my understanding is
All
that
right.
our staff can handle that.
Okay.
Yes.
That's great. That's where I got lost. I wasn't sure if we were seeking funding to do the analysis, or we're going to do the analysis and then maybe seek the funding depending on what the analysis shows, right? So
Yes.
member Straight.
Thank you,
Oh,
sir. I
sorry.
appreciate you. And thank you.
Deputy
too.
Jones is saying something. Let's go to member Straight and we'll come back.
Well, it's almost impossible for me as an educator to not support the concept and idea of 16 students per class. That's like a dream, right? And I went to Truth and Taxation last night, and building schools, the infrastructure. Wow, the infrastructure to get to 16 students, that I can't even imagine what that would cost, without even getting to the point of what it would mean as far as educators. I do appreciate, however, and the reason that I supported this is because in the end, we're looking for ways to improve student learning, whatever that may be. So I absolutely, totally support the idea of that principle. Also, improving student proficiency. That's what was so great about the 64 million that we put towards teacher-directed collaborative work, is that we would incentivize improving efficiency of educators, so when the school year does start, they're in a much better place. That's why I mentioned the idea that, well, what models do we already have that would increase the amount of attention of instructional assistance for our students in the classroom. If I had 60 students in the class and 3 aides, 60 students isn't a big deal. The problem becomes it's just me with 60 students. And so we know that many schools are starting to use push-in models in order to meet the tiered instructional needs of our students, and that is having a great effect. So the concept of improving student learning and what we could do to do that, I think that's the direction we need to go. I think it's a great start to say it'd be great to have 16 students per classroom. I don't think that's practical, but I do agree with the principle. So I think we need to look at this. I want to keep moving it along, but I would like to see the scope change to where it focuses that primary idea of student learning. Thank you.
Then hold on.
No, I'm up. I move that this item be postponed and go back to committee and potentially added for discussion tomorrow, if possible, so that, because I'm getting conflicting messages from out here and in my own head and from up here. And I think we need to get our language right, because our language, our recommended, we all want to know the information, but we got to get our language right in our motion, because it's not what I'm hearing everybody saying now.
I'll second. No, I can't. Can I second?
Doesn't.
We got a second from finance. Okay. Discussion of that motion to send back to committee for some further clarification. Let's see. I'm sorry. I got to follow the list here.
Sorry.
Member Earl, you are next.
I
Vice
actually
Chair
have a substitute motion that we change the language to say that the board directs staff to analyze the fiscal impact and bring to maintain student count of 16 or less in all Utah schools, Utah K-12, and bring a proposal back. Would you like me to read that again? So,
Sure. Yeah.
that the board directs staff to analyze, and then the fiscal impact to maintain. So it would strike some of that middle, the legislative request for 2024 session. I think we got to get information before we.
Is there a second to that
Yeah.
motion?
Oh, sorry, I spoke for it already.
Not hearing a
Do
second.
I need to read it again?
We have a second. Okay. Discussion of that motion.
Who's?
Member Klein, are you looking to speak, or Member Davis? So this gets us back to the main question. Do we need funding to do the analysis? And I think that's the tricky, no, we don't. Okay. So given we can do that work without funding, and we can find out what we see and maybe seek funding for whatever action that data may suggest to the board and staff, right? Okay. And I'm sorry if I'm dense there, but it seemed to me we were seeking funding to do the analysis and then bigger funding if we chose to pursue something. Other
I
comments or
just
questions?
want to
Member,
clarify on my motion, the end part.
back to Member Earl.
Yeah, not to develop a legislative request. I want the proposal to come back, and then that proposal would inform whether or not we develop a legislative request or whether we can continue with additional information, looking at models or whatever. So it would be after classrooms, it would say, and bring back a proposal for the board.
Hold on here. Let's see. We got Member Davis.
Still, Natalie, are you good with that?
We got Member Davis. It's
Um,
fine. Did I skip turn order? I'm sorry. I'm trying to follow my little list here. I'm sorry. You disappeared from my list, but Vice Chair Hart's got you.
No, I don't
No.
until you click.
We got
Molly, take the wheel.
I would speak against this proposal. I think the proposal that we have on the original motion that was made says that we want staff to look into this, to bring it and develop that, correct? And then bring it to the board. And at that point, we can look at that analysis that they've done to see if we then are going to make a legislative proposal, whether that be policy, whether that be finance, whether that be a combination. Am I correct? That's kind of what we felt when we left it. I shouldn't have addressed you, sorry. That's me speaking to the motion. I mean, against the current motion.
Okay. Member Lear.
I was persuaded by Brent's comments. I feel a lot like Member Davis in that I am confused in what's being asked for. And I want to support the committee and what you discussed, but I want it, and so I guess I want it broader because I want a broader discussion than this. Not just student count, but how would paras play into that? How would aides play into that? What is the stronger model is what I was hoping to hear. So I'll support the committee's original motion. This is less of what I want. But I'm equally confused if that helps too.
All right. Let's see. We've got Deputy Jones with the light back on.
No, you're not.
You're,
all right.
yes, Deputy Jones.
So Chair, if I may, just to check my understanding, do we all agree that the definition of fiscal impact is how much would it cost to get to 16 students? So the analyses you want the staff to do by virtue of the definition of fiscal impact is to come back to you, the board, with how much it would cost to get 16 students per class, no matter what type of class it is. Am I understanding that, Chair, correctly?
Well, that's certainly the original motion. And then we have.
Yes, sir. Trying to stay with the intent of the committee, the intent of the sponsor, and that was the original motion, sir.
So the original motion is to develop a legislative request for the 2024 legislative session to evaluate the fiscal impact. That suggests we are asking the legislature for funding to evaluate. And I don't think that's what we're talking about. We are talking about doing the evaluation and then seeing if the results of that suggest that there's something we want to seek funding for. And I apologize, but I think there's the language of the original motion suggests funding for the first part. And I think we're saying, no, we don't need funding to look at it. The other question becomes, how quickly can we do that? If we're analyzing what it takes to get to 16 by this model or that model, are we in a position to do that and come up with something that we might tee up as a legislative request for this session? So Chief of Staff Young.
I'm going to try and clarify. I think what's confusing is the title of the document that we use. So to take us all the way back to June, we worked with the board to provide direction to staff to say, create draft legislative funding requests. We call any request a legislative funding request if it is going to contain money. Those are all draft documents, but we do seek the board's approval to develop those drafts, which is the request today. That draft would be brought back to the board for your consideration in terms of saying, yes, this is board supported. It is not board supported. Or we like an aspect of this for board support, which is what we're going to be doing with the drafts previously authorized on Friday. So I think where the confusion is because we call that document a legislative funding request. We're not asking the board for funding. We're not authorizing any funding. You're just directing staff to create the draft. And then we would bring that draft back for final decision.
So the one difference there is the draft would involve an analysis that we've not yet seen. So that's the part that I think we're getting tripped up on, is we have a draft and we say, okay, let's see this, right? But there's action in between there that we're authorizing. I guess my question is, if we're asking for the analysis of what it takes to get to 16, which presumably would also show what it takes to get to 20 or whatever, right? I mean, if you set 16 as the target, you come up with other interesting data. But we're saying that staff could do that analysis in time to bring us a draft proposal for legislative funding to implement something this session. That's what we're talking about. It's not just authorize a draft, it's also authorize a study that we're going to cover and have paid for, right? So am I getting that right? Chief of Staff Young, and Member Davis is asking how much does that cost in time and money? So yeah, that's the question. It's not so much working up the draft proposal, it's the analysis that, right? Okay. Chief of Staff Young.
Yes, so there would be staff time that you are dedicating to that analysis. I would clarify that is similar to the staff time you have authorized for all of the other cases. So we are not asking for additional resources beyond that. You are authorizing your staff to work on this request in the exact same way that we have worked on other requests directed by the board that you will see tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other? I don't see any other lights. So we do have, let's go back to what's on the floor. We had an original motion. We had, I think Member Davis's motion would have been in the nature of a substitute to the committee, would it not? Member Davis's motion was to postpone. And then Vice Chair. So here's the question. Did we do this right when we had a motion coming out of committee?
General look, they're not going to spend 500 hours. They're going to take a general look and bring back kind of this is what a suggested cost would be to study all this in depth. We can go back to the original motion of the Finance Committee.
Well, we've got a substitute.
If there's an objection.
If there's no motion to postpone without objection, Member Davis would like to pull that. And so what we have is a substitute motion then that I think is an attempt to reframe, and we can vote on that, see if the body thinks this is the way to frame it. That the board directs staff to evaluate the fiscal impact to maintain a student count of 16 or less in all Utah K-12 classrooms and bring back a proposal to the board. That was seconded. Seeing no lights, let's vote on that substitute motion. We do have a light. Member Klein.
Sorry, number 10, I'm getting there.
It's on. It's on. Yeah, I'm just wondering if the motion that's on the floor, does it do what the first motion wanted to do, or would it help to just add in, bring back a possible legislative proposal?
Friendly,
Yes.
without objection. Back a legislative proposal to the board.
Yeah, I'm curious if Board Member Bogus sees that as in line with her original intent. Adding that language in,
Member Bogus,
bring
so
back
a legislative proposal to
a
the board.
possible legislative proposal to the board.
So, and again, correct me if my understanding is wrong, please. My understanding is the difference between these two motions is one would come back in a template for a legislative request that would come back in draft form, and the other one would come back outside of that template. And so really, we're looking at the exact same thing, if I understand you correctly. Yeah. And I just would love to see the board move on this so that our staff could move on it. And it may not be something we can address in this next legislative cycle, but I do think the teachers in this state would love to see us at least moving towards something that will alleviate some of their workload, and class size is one of those things. The number of things that reduce when you reduce class size is everything from paperwork to behavior interventions to documentation to help me out, Chair Norton, like conferences. It is substantial what a reduction in class size can do. And I understand that there's some classes we want large. You know, there's some of my classes I would love to be in the hundreds, honestly. But I don't like to instruct in the hundreds. When I do foundational instruction, I would like my students in small groups. And so I think that that would be a general statement that we could broad brush across the educator spectrum, is that our educators would like smaller classes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So to restate the motion as with the friendly amendment, Vice Chair Earl's substitute motion is that the board directs staff to evaluate the fiscal impact to maintain a student count of 16 or less in all Utah K-12 classrooms and bring back a legislative proposal to the board. So, Member Wood,
No.
Member Straight,
No.
Member Reel,
No.
Member Norton,
No.
Member Lear,
No.
Member Carey,
Yes.
Member Hymas,
No.
Vice Chair Hart,
No.
Member Green,
Yes.
Vice Chair Earl,
Yes.
Member Davis,
No.
Member Klein,
Yes.
Member Booth,
No.
Member Bogus,
Yes.
Member Moss, yes. I believe that fails. Fails by a vote of 9-6. So we're back to the original motion from the committee, which is committee moves that the board directs staff to develop a legislative request for the 2024 legislative session to evaluate the fiscal impact to maintain a student count of 16 or less in all Utah K-12 classrooms. Any comment to that motion? Member Bogus, did you have your light?
Oh, no, I just figured you were going the other direction this time, so I'm prepared, sir.
And so I don't see any other lights. I'll just say I believe this means that we are going to do the analysis to determine whether to ask for funding. And with that clarification, at least that's my understanding. I'm just stating my reasons for voting yes. Let's start with Member Bogus,
Yes.
Member Booth,
Yes.
Member Klein,
Yes.
Member Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Earl,
Yes.
Member Green,
Yes.
Member Vice Chair Hart,
Yes.
Member Hymas,
No.
Member Carey,
Yes.
Member Lear,
Yes.
Member Norton,
Yes.
Member Reel,
Yes.
Member Straight,
No.
Member Wood,
Yes.
and Member Moss is a yes. Okay, that passes 14 to 1, 13 to 2. 13 to 2. Back to you, Chair Norton.
Okay,
Who are the no votes? I'm sorry, we have a question. Okay, back to Chair Norton.
okay, so the next motion in that same arena is that the board directs staff to compile a list of existing teacher salary incentive programs proven effective through statistically significant student achievement data, including qualifying criteria, average incentive per teacher, total state allocation, and relevant program report to bring to the USBE Finance Committee.
Okay, I see no lights on that one. Let's vote. I
Ask for
I looked for lights. I'm sorry. I looked for lights.
You're
and missed
live.
you. Member Klein.
Okay, so my question is, my concern is if we end up providing incentive programs for more effective teaching, I'm assuming that's what this means. How do we prevent incentivizing cheating to get there? Does that make sense? If teachers know that they could be receiving a financial incentive for increased student achievement, it could incentivize better teaching, or it could incentivize teachers to cheat, to show better scores. So that's my question. How do we make sure it doesn't go the wrong way?
Is that a question to our staff? We have Member Straight up next.
Is that am I understanding the action correctly? Is that
So I think
so? There are already incentive programs in place that we are trying to figure out which are proven effective.
Would these be in state programs or more broadly? I can't recall what the intent was here. Would this be also to study other programs that are outside the state? I can't recall who put this together.
This was mine.
There you go. I'm sorry. I had you right in back.
And you've already answered, Chair, those questions. This was an evaluation of current programs to gain an understanding of their effectiveness so that we can potentially expand effective programs and eliminate less effective programs. Almost all of these were put into effect through the legislature. I know that there has been some work with APAC. When I was on APAC, there was discussion around some of these incentive programs. It wasn't comprehensive by any means, but there was discussion. This really was to get the ball rolling. I've been looking into some of the programs. For example, there's a program for national board certification, and my opinion, without any data or research behind it, is that particular program has proven to be very effective. But because I don't know the answer to that question, and I felt like we did need to know the answer to the question of whether that was highly effective, and I have some anecdotal evidence in my discussions with board certified teachers, asking them about that and the process. And the basic question I asked is, which was more effective in improving your teaching, national board certification or receiving your master's? And the overwhelming response that I received was national board certification. It is rigorous. It is, it really develops and has one's question, one whole pedagogy and how one addresses one's teaching as a profession. And so that was the purpose behind this. And I wasn't even sure if it would be a fair thing to throw something like that we could even get it accomplished for this session. But I did want to at least get it started. I did want to look into that, because if national board certification is highly effective, well, I want to continue to improve that. And it's quite the process. Anyway, I'll end there, but that was my intent.
Thank you. We've got member Carey. Maybe I'll just clarify to member Klein's question. I mean, we're not looking at doing research. I take it we're looking at to see what research is available out there about these programs.
Right.
We're not authorizing or funding a new study. We're asking to look at what's
No,
available
look at
out
what we
there.
have. What's yeah.
And that could presumably include whether there's been research done on cheating, whether it incentivize the disincentive to cheat to get more money, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
so that would be part of that
Yeah.
process of reviewing the existing research on the subject. Okay, member Carey.
I'd just like to make a substitute motion. And that would be the committee moves that the board direct staff to get seasick, compiles the staff to compile a ranked list. I'm only adding the word ranked. And my reason for that is I think all these programs we're going to find do good work. I think we're going to see benefits to students in all of these programs. And I understand they're different programs and some may help disadvantaged students or minority students or schools for the deaf and blind, whatever it may be. But I do think there's value in not just saying, hey, these programs are doing good, but saying, if you look at the totality of the work they are doing, and that metric can be different. Maybe it's the number of students, maybe it's the students benefiting. But I think our staff is capable of saying, in terms of the most good that's happening through these programs, this is the way we would rank them, rather than just coming back and saying all these programs do good, which I think we will find.
Okay. And I guess that's I want to see if that's a friendly amendment without objection, but we have, I guess the motion was put together by member Straight coming out of finance. So question to you, whether that's friendly?
I think that would be a part of a good analysis.
Any
If there's any
objection?
other, I have no objection.
Is there any objection to that being a friendly emotion? Because that's the question. Member Klein, objection to the friendly? If so, we'll discuss and vote.
No, not, I just had another question, not an objection to that, just about the motion in general or the issue.
Ranked list, right? So back to discussion, member Klein.
So when they do this study to figure out, which program works best, you're asking that they come up with criteria to determine that by. And is there some kind of, do we know what the qualifying criteria is that they'll be going by? Is it, it says student achievement data. So it's not just, I guess I don't know exactly what my question is. Teachers that become national board certified, they automatically get an increase in salary just for becoming certified. Is that correct? So that is the incentive, is to get certified. But do we know if that actually plays out in the classroom as achieving better results with the students?
I think that's the intent of the review, right? Of review the literature and research on whether these actually produce results for students.
Well, that's what I want to find out, if it's clear enough. I
think we're just trying to get past.
Right. See. So is this, and which of our staff would be taking the lead on this? It sounds like there might be some discussion with staff on the kind of contours of the study. Superintendent Dixon. Yeah, and I think, it looks like the criteria would be, well, these would be measurements or elements of it. Superintendent Dixon.
Thank you, Chair Moss. Many of these programs that are legislated were instituted for recruitment and retention, and a lot of them were around retention. So I would have to go back and listen to the committee discussion, and I would defer to committee members. While student achievement is always an intended outcome, again, a lot of these were about finding ways to provide opportunities for teachers to lead, for teachers to be retained. And I can think of at least 3 or 4 that are legislative that are now kind of these historical programs that there wasn't a bunch of criteria around them other than how do we recruit and retain teachers. So I don't know if that was the genesis of your conversation, or I guess in order for staff to know how to accomplish this, we need to understand what is it that the committee is trying to accomplish. Are you trying to look at making a recommendation to compile this money into one funding stream, or to like intent is always helpful before we do an analysis. What is it that you're trying to find? And so we can take this offline, but we have to go back to intent of some of these programs to Board Member Klein's point, looking at criteria, and a lot of that was around recruiting and retention of teachers.
Yeah, I think the intent here is exploratory, as I understand it, not with any particular possible action in mind, but I think it raises a great question. You know, if these were put in for retention, are they also promoting student success? But we've got things that have been in effect for a long time. How are they doing towards the end goal, right? And then what that analysis produces might suggest a course of action in one way or the other. Member Wood?
Just a question. So currently on our USB website, we have 3 programs: the Teacher Salary Supplement Program, the National Board Professional Teaching Standards Certificate, and then the Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools. Are there other programs that would go into this study that are not currently listed on our website?
Deputy Jones, Superintendent. Superintendent or Deputy Jones, either. Oh.
She has hers on. You're on.
Go ahead. Okay. So it would just be those, well, if we understood the intent coming out, it would just be those 3 incentive programs. Now we did, Dr. Norman reached out to other states to get some initial feedback and input on what other incentive programs are out there nationwide, but our focus would be on what differences those 3 programs are making, unless otherwise told to do something else. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Bogus up next.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I probably should have objected to Member Carey's motion. If I recall correctly, the discussion in committee was we just want a list of programs, and then we were going to decide how we wanted the staff to evaluate those programs. And so I think we're making this more complex than the committee originally intended. Because, and again, committee members, correct me if my recollection is wrong, but I remembered we wanted a list. And that was it. And then the committee itself was going to decide what to do with that list and how to direct staff once we had it.
Chair Norton's up next, and she might have a comment or response to that.
I think Board Member Straight's probably better to answer that particular question. I do have a comment though, or point afterwards.
Well, either way, Member Straight, she's going to defer over to you.
I'm about 50-50 because I know what the genesis was, because everyone has a story. You talk to a legislator, they all have a story. It just came from asking the question. And now I'm starting to think ahead because, and that thought process was, well, if we incentivized this particular program and we provided every time they, just like in letters, you receive stipends at certain points in the process. If, for example, National Board Certification, 3-year process, if you go through that process, you receive a stipend of some sort, and then each one of those 3 years. Now, I'm starting to get down the weeds, which is where I didn't want to be with this, because we needed the information first. What are the programs? How, and that information, then the committee could work from there. And I didn't necessarily look at this as having to get done right now, but at the same time, maybe we can, but we'll have to see. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Thank you. I think what we have here, just for clarity, I'm not going to argue the motion, but a ranked list of programs proven effective through statistically significant achievement data. So this suggests that our staff will look to see what research is out there on these programs, and to the extent that the research indicates an ability to rank them, they will bring that to finance. It doesn't say we're going to fund this, we're going to do anything else with it. It still seems to me exploratory, informational, helpful, you know, and go back to finance to figure out, okay, do we go deeper? So I don't see this as an immediate action item. Like Member Straight says, it's going to explore, take what time we need to, and inform us. To me, this is just another good ROI question. So if there's no further comments, I do have Deputy Norman, but I'm not sure if I'm reading the right slide, right? Reading the lights, right?
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman. I just wanted to say that we do have two items, one that Deputy Jones just spoke to previously through the ECS. And with ECS, we reached out and asked them about teacher incentive programs and also what that looked like for academic achievement. They sent back a study. We can forward that on to all of you as board members. We also have what we presented to the legislature for teacher retention in the 2023 legislative session. And part of that is what the outcomes are for student academics involved with educator salary adjustment, teacher salary supplement, and also by teacher license level and what that looks like for educational outcomes for students. So we can gather that together, first of all, to send to you in the beginning and then dive down further.
Beautiful, thank you. That's exactly, I think, what the intent was, is to get us under the hood and see what's working and how. Thank you. Okay, before I speak too soon, seeing no lights. Okay. We will vote on the motion amended, which is the committee moves that the board directs staff to compile a ranked list of existing teacher salary incentive programs proven effective through statistically significant student achievement data, including qualifying criteria, average incentive per teacher, total state allocation, relevant program reports, to bring to the USBE Finance Committee. Member Wood, I believe. Sorry? Did you have your light on? I'm sorry.
No. I just turned it on because after having a sidebar with Superintendent Dixon and Vice Chair Earl, I'm going to withdraw the substitute motion.
I guess, let's see, it was adopted as a friendly. Can we remove it as a friendly without objection? All right, ranked is removed. Let me just read for the record to make sure we're getting it right then. The friendly amendment having been friendly withdrawn, the committee moves that the board directs staff to compile a list of existing teacher salary incentive programs proven effective through statistically significant student achievement data, including qualifying criteria, average incentive per teacher, total state allocation, relevant program reports, to bring to the USBE Finance Committee. Member Klein.
I would make a motion to strike the words proven effective. So that we can, I'm trying to figure out how to say it so that it's just, we are just given the data and then we can decide for ourselves if that's appears to be effective. Yes, I don't want the qualifier on there.
So the motion.
It's because that's assuming that, I mean, that's saying that they're proven effective when maybe they're not.
So let me just frame the motion so we see if there's a second. The motion would be a list of existing teacher salary incentive programs through statistically significant, et cetera, with
the data that
I don't know this, if we just ask for the student achievement data, the average incentive per teacher, the total state allocation, the relevant program reports, et cetera, to bring to the USBE Finance Committee.
So you're still asking for the data on
Just
student
without
achievement that is linked to each of these programs, but not in necessarily a ranking or evaluation of whether they're effective.
Right.
Just the data tying effectiveness to the program without the conclusion.
Right.
Effectively. Okay. Is there a
So
second?
we can draw our own conclusions.
Is there a second?
Second it.
Okay. It's been seconded. Any member Lear, discussion of the motion?
we are paying these people a lot of money. They've got great expertise. I absolutely want their conclusions. I don't mind other people wanting the data to check their work, but I absolutely want to hear the staff's evaluation and conclusions about this.
Okay, any further comment, question, Member Bogus? I think, let's see.
Thank you, sir. So I don't think in the original motion, and Member Straight, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're asking staff to conduct any evaluation. We're just asking them to ensure that the program has statistically significant student achievement, meaning statistically significant is a mathematical concept. So it has to be a certain rate of increase in student achievement in order to be included in the list. Qualifying criteria, like what you have to do to qualify to be a part of this program, average incentive per teacher, the money that the state allocates. I don't recall any conversation where we ask our staff to draw conclusions and bring those conclusions to the committee. We ask them to bring the information to the committee for the committee to look at those and then query beyond that. And that's how I read that original motion. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Wood?
I guess my question would be, because I almost speak to this amendment, because I'd like to know whether they're effective or not. So if they see some that really aren't working, we should have those brought to us also, so that we can maybe tell the legislature these aren't working. So bring all of them. Yeah, bring all of them. Yeah. So, okay. That would be my understanding. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no Member Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, just, and I'm in agreement with this because it's just that, it's bring all programs. We're not putting a qualifier on it. These are, all programs should come. It shouldn't just be those proven effective. We should know all the programs. That's the point of looking at it.
Okay. Member Lair.
You don't want any analysis by the staff at all? A lot of programs, many programs, 2, 5, 18. I appreciate their analysis. It doesn't preclude board members doing their own review of the programs and data, but I think Jennifer Thronson's much better at telling me what has been effective in her evaluation than just giving me data.
So to the maker, in comment or Vice Chair Earl, yeah.
I thought the intent was to bring all programs so that they could be looked at, not the intent to analyze the programs and tell you which programs to look at. Am I wrong in saying that? It sounded to me like it was a compilation of all so that we could narrow it down to effective and effective.
Straight. Back to Member Straight.
Thank you. Maybe this will help. In my mind, we want to look at all of our own and plus others that staff have found to be effective from outside the area. For example, some work has already been completed regarding looking at other states and their programs. So let's look at all of ours plus any others from outside of Utah that staff believes have been proven effective. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. If I could just maybe take a shot at kind of stating where we are. They're not going to rank them. They're not going to say whether they're effective, but they are going to review the available research and data on whether there's a connection between the program and student success, right? So we're going to get the analysis. We're just not going to have the conclusion. So I think to Member Lear's point, we do want to know what they find in terms of the effectiveness, but we're going to bring it back and see what we want to do with it, discuss it in Finance Committee. Okay, we have Member Davis, Member Bogus. Then I think we'll vote and take a break. I'm getting signals that we.
Yeah, I would probably vote against this just in the interest of time. I don't want to study lots and lots and lots of programs. I just, from what I remember from our committee discussion, I just want to find that a handful of programs out there that are great, the ones we're already using, and maybe a couple in other states that have been finding success, and look at those and see if it's something that we do or don't want to implement here.
Member Bogus.
Yes, sir. I would just move to amend the amendment. And
Okay.
if this passes, I do think we need to strike the words proven effective through statistically significant student achievement data. And then change the, no, just a comma, including qualifying, yeah. Strike the words effective, proven effective through statistically significant student achievement data. Just strike those words. If this were to pass, I think that would be the better way to verbalize it to our staff. And that way we get what Member Wood may be asking for, which is we get a list of programs and you just tell us how they work.
Is there a second to that motion to amend?
Second.
Hearing no second. Okay, we got a second. Member Green, I believe. Okay, discussion of that motion. Okay, so this would take out any analysis of whether the programs being reviewed have a statistically significant effect on student achievement. Is that correct? Member Bogus?
As I'm listening to the conversation, I think that is the effect that is wanted from those having the discussion. And so my point is not necessarily to say that I want this. My point is to say that if that is our goal, this is the way I think we should verbalize it to our staff.
Okay, seeing no other lights except Member Wood. You're on. And back to Member Klein. I've got, well, let's see. What's the order? It's actually now it's showing Klein and then Wood. I swear these are flipping on me. Okay, Member Klein. Thank you.
I think the student achievement data is still important to include as one of the sets of data that are included. So I wouldn't be in favor of taking or removing the student achievement data.
Okay, Member Wood.
That was exactly what I was going to say. We have to have some kind of data. And my proven effective was I did not want our current programs that you talk, our 3 that are listed there, to be, if there could be bias. I don't know. Maybe our staff has bias in terms of one program they love and one program they don't. And so I wanted to see all 3. But if we're bringing other programs from other places, we definitely have to have some data to back up. Why would we even look at that?
Okay, and I think that does go back to Member Klein.
So I'm just wondering if
Again, sorry.
I'm just wondering if we can do a friendly amendment to get at what we're trying to do, so that it would say a list of existing teacher salary incentive programs, including significantly, statistically significant student achievement data, average incentive per teacher total. So I think we would take out proven effective and proven effective through, and just put including there instead. So incentive programs, including statistically significant student achievement data, comma, average incentive per teacher. So I would take out the qualifying criteria and proven effective through. Does that make sense? I don't know who's typing.
So this is let's see, let's make sure we got the cascade of motions here. Is this a second motion?
I'm just making a friendly, if Christine is okay with that, so that we keep
still
the
have to make
student
sure
achievement
it's-
data. I mean,
Yeah, I still need to make sure any amendment is in order. It's not a third amendment. We're still okay, right? This is a second amendment. Yeah.
So can I just make a new amendment?
Do it without objections, fine. Yeah, if you can do it without objections, fine, if it needs to be in motion.
We're hearing if friendly is okay. Okay. Member
Please.
Bogus, would you consider this friendly?
They didn't type it up right. So they need to strike proven. Yeah.
So Chair, my point in the amendment was, and I don't know that I would have voted for my motion, but it was to clarify what I believed the body was asking of our staff. So if that is not what we are asking of our staff, perhaps we should frame the language that we want a list of existing teacher salary incentive programs, comma, including statistically significant student achievement data, comma, qualifying criteria, comma. I'm just trying to get the language to what the body wants so that we're not putting them in a place where they don't understand what we've asked for.
Okay, so here's the problem. Now we've got another amendment. We've got to just keep some Robert's rules going. And unfortunately, we've got an amendment that doesn't appear to be friendly. There's an objection to the amendment. It's a third amendment. So I think we have to decide that it's out of order, which puts us back to the Bogus
I have a
amendment.
point of order.
Point of order, Member Davis.
I have a point of order. And this is something that I probably need to take some responsibility for, but I don't think this is a motion that ever should have been brought to the board, because the end of the motion says, and to be brought back to USBE Finance Committee, which is something internally we can do as a committee and ask for information to be brought back and then decide if we want to bring something to the board about any of these things or not. It was a request for information, and I think it needs to go back to be a request for information. If I have a substitute motion to move this back to information to go to the committee, and then if we want to flesh out something for the full board, we can.
So I'm not sure if substitute's in order, given that we already have two amendments on the floor. I know, it's a substitute.
You have to motion, yeah, you have to.
Can you bring a substitute, though?
Substitute, they have to vote.
The yellow flag, there we go. We were waiting for the yellow flag's appearance.
We have to vote on this, and then she could make a substitute.
That's what I'm understanding. Right. Sorry. Okay. So let's make sure we got, well, let's take some votes here. Let's take some action and clear through this and see what we all want to do. So we're on Member Bogus's motion to amend the amendment, as I understand it, that the board strike the words proven effective through statistically significant achievement data. We've had discussion. Seeing no lights, let's vote. Member Wood. Member Straight.
No.
No.
Member Reel.
No.
Member Norton.
No.
Member Lear. Member Carey.
Yes.
Member Hymas.
No.
Vice Chair Hart.
No.
Member Green.
Yes.
Vice Chair Earl.
No.
Member Davis.
No.
Member Klein.
No.
Member Booth. No. Member Bogus.
No.
Member Moss is a no. That brings us back to Member Klein's. Right?
It's 13 to 2.
13 to 2. Fails by 13 to 2. And let's see. We are back to Member Klein's motion to amend that the board strike the words proven effective and leave the rest as stands. Seeing no lights, Member Bogus.
Yes.
Member Booth. No. Member Klein.
Yes.
Member Davis.
No.
Member or Vice Chair Earl.
Yes.
Member Green.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hart.
No.
Member Hymus,
No.
Member Carey, Member Lear,
No.
Member Norton,
No.
Member Reel,
No.
Member Straight,
No.
Member Wood, Member Moss is a yes.
We can, we don't need to take.
So, sorry, that motion fails 8-7. And we are back to the underlying original motion, I believe. Am I getting that correct, Sybil?
Yes.
All right, so the motion is that committee moves that the board directs staff to compile a list of existing teacher salary incentive programs proven effective through statistically significant achievement data, including qualifying criteria, average incentive per teacher, total state allocation, and relevant program reports to bring to the USBE Finance Committee. Member Wood, you're on, unless Member Straight wants to speak. Are you just in line to vote? Okay, Member Wood,
Yes.
Member Straight,
Yes.
Member Reel,
Yes.
Member Norton,
Yes.
Member Lear,
Yes.
Member Carey,
Yes.
Member Hymus,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hart,
No.
Member Green,
No.
Vice Chair Earl,
No.
Member Davis,
Yes.
Member Klein,
No.
Member Booth,
Yes.
Member Bogus,
No.
Member Moss is a yes. That passes 10-5, I believe, correct? Okay, we have had a request for a short break. We've got 20 minutes to lunch and only 3 committees reports to get through. So what's the over under? What's the over under out there? Yes, absolutely. If you want to do that, let's go to the next part of finance then. Unless other people want to break now. Are we? No Robert's rules here. Shout it out if you want to break.
Prove fruitful. I know that I am close to the door, but other members may need to use the restroom. We have been here for over 3 hours.
Sorry, taking 5. Begin it.
And they're like, huh. I don't even.
All right. We are back on for finance. Let's see, we're missing a couple still.
Yeah.
All right, we got a quorum. Back to you, Chair Norton. Oh, let's see. Oh, come on.
That the board directs staff, no, I move that the board directs staff to communicate with the state auditor's office for the removal of the requirements for external auditors to evaluate the use of contra revenue accounts for school fee compliance effective state fiscal year 2025.
Okay, any discussion or comment to that motion? Seeing Member Davis. Let's see. Oh, hold on. Member Davis.
I'll speak in favor of the motion. We've had for a few years now, our BAs saying that they can accommodate what's required legally using other accounting methods than contra revenue accounting. But regardless, USIMS, if I understand correctly, is taking away the need for the contra revenue accounting. And so this would just take care of the OSA piece that goes with that. They've already done fiscal for 2024. Debbie Davis is shaking her head no. So we're asking them not to use this method for fiscal year 2025.
CAE Davis, thank you for joining us.
Okay, so yes, Debbie Davis, Chief Audit Executive for the board. Just to be specific, the contra revenue account requirement is an accounting requirement. So it is required by GASB GAAP. That does not change with this motion. All of this motion states is that external auditors will not review for use of contra revenue accounts when they do the external audit. That's the difference. So the accounting requirement stays because that's GASB GAAP. So that stays, just external auditors will not review or evaluate the use of, we will remove that from the state compliance audit guide. That's an audit standard. Accounting standard remains. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. Yes, Member Davis.
And maybe we need to delve into this a little more, but my understanding was that was not a requirement for that. But regardless, maybe it's because of the way that we were defining fees, because contra revenue accounting is actually, anyway, we could be here forever. But Deputy Superintendent Jones, could you also weigh in? Because now I'm super confused.
Deputy Jones.
Right. So Chief Audit Executive Davis is right about exactly what she said. My understanding, though, and I could be wrong about this, is some of the business administrators say that there are other methods that they can use that are also acceptable in GAAP than contra revenue accounts. Now, what that looks like exactly, I don't know. And that's why we wanted to make sure we didn't do this until 25, is because then, you know, we can bring the systems up and make sure that whatever process or internal control they're doing to ensure that the collection of school fees at the school level is documented, we'd have time to see what they mean by that. If they're saying that they don't have to use contra revenue accounts, well, okay, then what would you use, right? And I think that's what Chief Audit Executive Davis is saying, is we can't eliminate something that's required by GAAP or GAAP or GASB, but then, okay, business administrators, if you're not going to use contra revenue accounts at the school level when you collect those fees, what are you going to use? And that's what we're trying to get, carved out, so to speak. So is that fair, Debbie? Yeah.
Member Davis.
I think that's fair. I think that's what I understand. And we weren't prior using contra revenue accounting. We instituted that at a board rule level. So, if we want the flexibility to institute something different, we need to work with the OSA to make sure that this is in place first. And that would give us, if we want or not want to make that change in board rule, especially when USIMS comes up, which is my understanding that USIMS is going to be helpful in this area.
Thank you. Any further follow-up, CA Davis?
Yeah, well, go
Or
ahead.
Deputy Jones?
Well,
Either one.
well, so just to clarify, Chair, if I may, USIMS will be helpful because it will help us see how they're coding the collection of fees at the school level, right? I mean, that has to be something that is done. If they're not booking them into contra revenue accounts, or it really goes to what internal controls they have to ensure that there's transparency in the collection of school fees that meet the rule and or the code governing school fees. So that's USIMS will help because we can, conceivably get real-time ledger data on how they're coding the collection of school fees at the lowest level. So.
All right. Dave, yeah.
And then just one follow-up on that as well. So the state compliance audit guide, which this motion is about, follows board rule. It doesn't come before. Fixing something in the state compliance audit guide is not going to impact the accounting. Audit comes afterwards. So that does not impact. Could we have conversations with the state auditor's office? Absolutely. What happened was in putting contra revenue accounts in R277113, you were codifying an interpretation of GASB GAAP. So and that interpretation was and we went and talked to accounting professors and state finance, and there can be different interpretations, but the interpretation that was codified in rule was that contra revenue accounts as per GASB GAAP are required. Anyway, I won't go into all the technical accounting details, but I just wanted to make sure it was clear so you all know what you're voting on as far as the state compliance audit guide is concerned. That follows board rule, it follows accounting, it's coming afterwards. So changing something in the state compliance audit guide will not impact the accounting treatment of revenue or contra revenue.
Got it. Thank you. And that answers the question, Member Davis. Sounds like, okay. All right. It's what? Okay. All right. So it doesn't change accounting, just addresses audit. Okay. Seeing no other lights, the motion is the committee moves that the board direct staff to communicate with the state auditor's office for the removal of the requirements for external auditors to evaluate the use of contra revenue accounts for school fee compliance effective state fiscal year 2025. Member Bogus.
Yes, sir.
Member Booth.
Yes.
Member Klein.
Yes.
Member Davis.
Yes.
Member Vice Chair Earl.
Yes.
Member Green.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hart.
Yes.
Member Hymas.
Yes.
Member Carey.
Yes.
Member Lear.
Yes.
Member Norton.
Yes.
Member Reel.
Yes.
Member Straight.
Yes.
Member Wood.
Yes.
Member Moss is a yes. That passes by unanimously. Okay. All right. Let's see. Back to Chair Norton.
Okay, 4.3, I move that the board recommend the legislature take no action and allow subsection 53F 9-203, subsection 7 to sunset on July 1st, 2024.
Thank you.
That is the Charter School Revolving Loan Account Committee sunset recommendation.
Okay. I see no lights on that one. So let's vote, beginning with Member Wood.
Yes.
Member Straight.
Yes.
Member Reel.
Yes.
Member Norton.
Yes.
Member Lear.
Yes.
Member Carey.
Yes.
Member Hymas.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hart.
Yes.
Member Green.
Yes.
Vice Chair Earl.
Yes.
Member Davis.
Yes.
Member Klein.
Yes.
Member Booth.
Yes.
And Member Bogus.
Yes.
And Member Moss is a yes. That passes unanimously. Back to Chair Norton.
Okay, item 4.4, this is the plan and process for communication concerning the school trust councils, and school land trust program. I move that the board approve the proposed plan for school trust communication with the finance committee and plan for school trust communication with the full board as outlined.
Any discussion, comment to that motion? If not, let's vote. Member Bogus,
Yes.
Member Booth,
Yes.
Member Klein,
Yes.
Member Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Earl,
Yes.
Member Green,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hart,
Yes.
Member Hymus,
Yes.
Member Carey,
Yes.
Member Lear,
Yes.
Member Norton,
Yes.
Member Reel,
Yes.
Member Straight,
Yes.
Member Wood,
Yes.
and Member Moss is a yes. That passes unanimously. And I think that concludes the finance portion. So we are at our scheduled lunch time. And I think we probably need to go ahead and break for lunch, take 30 minutes, come back and go into law and licensing. See you at 1. Lunch is as usual out on the counter, just through the door there.